Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really into the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you will find stuff probably unavailable anywhere else. We're an established group with a large membership, and best of all, we're friendly. The link is in the YouTube description section.
Can you hear those children next door? There's a children's
slightly, yeah.
I mean, that's a sound you probably haven't heard for
no, not for many years.
33 years. How does that sound to you?
Nice. There's a few things I've got to get used to now that I'm out. It's going to be a bit complex, but I don't think it's anything I can't cope with. Of course, it'd be very interesting. I think everything out is beautiful myself. It's just a matter of getting used to it.
On March the 8th, 1969, Britain's two most notorious gangsters, the Kray twins, were sentenced to life imprisonment for murder, with a recommendation that they serve not less than 30 years. Reggie Kray was released from prison in August 2000 on compassionate grounds, suffering from terminal cancer. From hospital, he gave his first interview, during which he discussed various aspects of his life. Reggie died shortly afterwards.
It was a very happy childhood. We used to go to a school called Wood Close, which was just opposite where we lived in Valence Road. There's a little schoolyard where the kids used to play. And when we used to leave there, we used to race home. It wasn't very far, a couple of 100 yards, and we was back in Valence Road. And my mum was a really very warm person. She would never run anyone down, and she's just all giving. She's giving all the time.
Violet, their mother, who was immensely respectable. I mean, I knew her really quite well. She was a sort of Cockney Queen mother. And, you know, her boys were her bunny rabbits, and she never, you know, their boys would never do anything. And she genuinely believed it.
They idolised the mother. Not so much the old man. No, they used to have their rows with the old man because he didn't like what they was doing. You know, no one likes their children to be like they was.
And my father worked at Old Clothes Barn, so we would see him pretty often. The way it was in East End, sons would bestow more affection or love on the mother than they did the father, because it was the East End's way. When I was a kid, we all looked up to different people. They might have been a footballer or a fighter, most certainly a fighter, boxer, or a villain if I fought in the street. Sonny Muller was one. He was heavyweight fighter and he was heavyweight villain. And then there's Tommy Smithson. He used to fight in the Merchant Sea as a sailor. Lots of fighters from the area, you know.
The old grandfather was a hero for them. He was called Cannonball Lee, the Southpaw Cannonball. He used to be an old boxer who then did musical turns.
Well, it was like a normal thing, an old bare-knuckle fighter them days. My grandfather was a bare-knuckle fighter. Twins idolised him. It was honest money, hard money. And I think that was the reason why everyone in the East End wanted to box.
We started off by going to a boxing fair that was in Bethnal Green Road. And we went to this fairground and we were so excited, but you couldn't forget about boxing afterwards. We just got carried away with it.
The twins' elder brother, Charlie, had been a boxing champion whilst serving in the Royal Navy, and was keen to encourage Ron and Reg.
There was a fantastic amount of kids in the area who got great pleasure going into the Krays gym, which was a room, a bedroom. They would put up a punch bag and a ball, and Charlie taught them how to box.
Went to a club in South London, Robert Browning Club. We started training over there, and we won South East Divisional Championships.
On December the 11th, 1951, all three Kray brothers fought on the same bill at the Royal Albert Hall. Charlie and Ronnie lost. Reg won.
My 55 amateur fights, 150. I had 7 professional, 1 7.
I think he would have been British champion quite easily, quite easily. Ronnie was beaten several times because he never had the temperament, he never had the up here for it.
And then when I stopped boxing, I started getting my left hook together more. And it played a great part in my street fights.
After they were 16, 17, Charlie was saying to me one day, can't you do something about our twins? And I said, Charlie, nobody can do anything about your twins. You know, you've got to realise your twins are quite powerful in their own way. And no, I couldn't do anything about them. They won't listen to anybody.
When I first knew them, I found them very amusing in a way, you know. And though there was the excitement and danger about them, I used to laugh at their antics, you know.
I met them many Saturday mornings. They were always getting themselves nicked on Friday night and appearing in court on Saturday morning. They were the sort of thing that wouldn't go further than the magistrate's court. Things like being a suspected person, the old sus laws. And they were charged again and again with that type of crime, or trying car door handles. You know, really soppy things.
In March 1950, the twins found themselves in serious trouble. A teenage gang fight left one youth with serious injuries.
Well, they got charged. They was at the Old Bailey, I think it was. And that was a big, because they was young at the time. That was the first serious offence. It happened in Club Road. And they had bicycle chains and they chained him on the floor and that. He was on the danger list.
On this occasion, the twins were acquitted, but it was not long before they found themselves in trouble again.
Oh, we got done for assault on the police. So 16. GBH it was really. GBH.
You and Ronnie together?
Yeah, we was on the corner of Mansell Street, and all the kids then used to knock about on the street corners. But this particularly night, a copper by the name of Baden came along and punched me on the back of the neck about asking him to move on. Should ask him to move on. So I gone punched him on the back of the neck and he ran over and he got kicked in the face wherever. And because we was arrested a bit later on that day with assault on the police.
When he punched Ronnie in the back, that changed Ronnie's attitude to policemen generally. He was a bully of a man, bashed him in the back. Oh, Ronnie done him, didn't he? Crush bang, you know, and worst thing he could have done because he was a fit kid. And then he chased Reggie, and that happened outside Hooker's Caff the first time on the corner of Mape Street. And then the next time he caught Reggie. And Reggie bashed him as well, you know. And of course, he'd been up by two boys, 2 youths. He didn't know he'd been up by 2 youths. Well, he didn't catch Reggie, because Reggie legged out. But he went round his house to nick him. And the family, collectively, said, you're not taking him in and giving him a bashing. Look at Ronnie in there. Look at his face. And the governor come round with Bainton to nick Reggie. And they finally let him go. And I think they got a caution, didn't they? I don't think they went away and they got a caution.
And that was our first one. And then a little while later we got another assault on the police. Got a month in the scrubs. Yeah, we really enjoyed getting kicked out of the army. We didn't enjoy going in there. We enjoyed getting kicked out of the army.
They were at the Tower of London and they were in the Royal Fusiliers, and the mum said, would you take them some cigarettes and some chocolate? I said, how do I get in? And she said, just go to the Tower, and if you get challenged, you say, Royal Fusiliers. I got in there and went, hello, lol. He said, how are you? I said, very, very well, Ron. I said, I brought you some chocolate and some cigarettes. She went, smashing, how did you get in? I said, I just walked through the thing, and I said, Royal Fusiliers, nobody stopped you. Marvellous, he said. You just walked straight in. Yeah, I said, I just walked straight in, Ron. He said, lovely. He said, this boy's doing my boots. He's the best boot polisher here, ain't you, mate? And his kid's polishing his boots. He said, look at them, he said. I'm useless at anything like that. This boy's marvellous. After about an hour, I was sitting there talking. He went, I think you better go now. He said, I should get locked in with us. You wouldn't like that, would you? I said, no thanks, Fred. He came out, it's nearly 12 o'clock. I better tell their mum. Light was still on in the passage, knocked at the door. Mrs. Kray opened the door. I said, Mrs. Kray, they're all right. He said, come in, Lowell, they're upstairs. they legged it. One had got on a chair, put a tie around his neck, said, quick, my brother's hanging himself. The guys come running, bust, knocked him over, locked him in the door and legged it, gone home. Went on the truck, you know.
As soon as the guard opened the door, Ron grabbed him in the headlock, and which he's very good at. He used to knock him over. And as he was falling, Dickie Morgan hit him on the chin. That's the right was, yeah. And I grabbed the keys off the one this side, and we just went right through that gate there, up through that one there, right across the parade yard.
Well, it's all a caper. I mean, a lot of these stories originally came as a couple of Cockney wide boys, which is what they were originally. And they didn't want to fight in the army, so they banged their way out of the glass house, out of the knee.
And we eventually got court martial. We've done lots of other things, like burnt cell, we've done everything. So eventually we went to Shepton Mallet, to 9 months army prison. And we got dishonourable discharge. Got 9 months.
And Shepton Mallet was a good breeding ground for crime. All sorts of choice characters figured in their later story.
When they was in the Tower, Shepton Mallet, they wasn't no worse than anybody else then. It was when all this killing and all that come about that they got worse than everybody else.
Came out of the army and taken over the billiard hall, which was their first venture into business.
When the twins took over the Regal, it was a big place. It wasn't a small place, you know, it was a big place. Laid at the back of Mile End Station, at Eric Street. By the car site on the front.
They congregated there with people they met in the army, Dickie Morgan and various other people, people of like kind.
Invariably, you got a lot of the fly-by-nights in there, you know, they always got a pair of shoes or a shirt they're selling or something like that.
It was more like a labour exchange for thieves, really. You went in there and see if anything was on offer and that sort of thing.
They had people that sort of worked for them and running about for them and doing their bidding, but not villainy. I'm not talking about none of that villainy game, because they would, if they had the needle with someone, they would never ask somebody else to go and do it. They would go and do it themselves.
Each area of London had its own organised crime group, if you like. It was neighbourhood based. They made their money from thieving, from stealing, and also from various kinds of extortion. The big area to plunder immediately after the war was the West End of London. And the main players there, you had Jack Spot Comer and you had Billy Hill. Both men of violence, and they clashed. It was a clash over territory, it was a clash over personalities. And as far as the relationship with the Krays were concerned, the Krays were really seen as likely lads who were coming through. These were highly marketable young men who proved themselves as local men of violence in the East End of London and were being spotted by these elder statesmen of crime as being possible cohorts.
They were in fact spot men, really. Originally, the story is that they were hired by Spot to defend him at the spring meeting at Epsom in, I think 1955.
I can remember Ronnie saying, we're going to the races. I said, what do you know about the races, Ron? He said, well, not a lot. He said, but we could soon learn, and we're going with Jack Spot. And he loved the idea.
He was a funny man. He used to sort of hold court in the Cumberland Hotel at Marble Arch, sort of very much like sort of one of the old-time mafiosi with a sort of fedora hat on and a smart suit and having his boots polished. As Spot was on the decline, the men he'd had defected to Hill, where the pickings were an awful lot better, and he eventually quarrels with a man called Albert Dimes, who was the Hill number 2, and they had a celebrated fight in Frith Street where they cut each other to ribbons.
I've gone round one day and there's Jack Spot, you know, this man who Ronnie was in awe of, sitting in their kitchen with Lord knows, cuts on his face like nothing, you know. Well, he looked up at me, and he was sitting down, and he said, "I'll be back, son, I'll be back." And I thought, you won't be coming back anywhere. You're finished, mate. You know, your days of being #1 gangster are over.
Spot fell right out of the picture. What there was left of him.
Yeah. And you, as young men, aligned yourself with Billy Hill.
He's a very good person. I liked him a lot.
So were you his proteges?
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
Well, Reggie might say that Billy Hill was his role model because he was smarter, he was, in his opinion, cleverer than Spot, and he was also, in Reggie's opinion, more like Reggie than Ronnie.
When we was going racing, he called us to his flat in Bayswater, and he turned around and said, "If you're going racing, I'll give you my pitch to go to," which we was very pleased about. He said William Hill was his name, correct name, and it was also the correct name of William Hill, the bookmakers. He had a court case with the particular bookmakers because they said he was promoting money on their name, which he wasn't. He won the case and he beat him. And we was very proud to have it all as our first pitch down the races, Derby Day.
Billy Hill was the great example to them because Billy Hill was one of the few people actually, having spent 17 years in the nick, he did finally make a bit of money out of crime.
Billy Hill was a user. Simple and straightforward as that.
They was being used to use violence on other people for a pittance. And they wasn't satisfied with having a pittance. They said, "Well, we'll have the lot."
There was a big meeting held in Clerkenwell where we decided what certain people would get, what Jack Spot was getting previous. After that particular meeting, the twins was the governor of everything.
Ron was pathetic. You know, he had a massive breakdown. He was certified, and Reg always had to look after him, you see.
What happened, Ron got 3 years at the Old Bailey, and he went to Winchester prison, and whilst there, he had some trouble, he got certified, and so he went to Long Grove, which is a mental hospital. And he decided that he wanted to have it away from there. He told me on a visit.
When Ronnie was incarcerated in a mental hospital, there was a switch between Reggie and Ronnie. Ronnie walks out when Reggie's come to do the visiting, and no one seems to notice that Ronnie isn't Reggie, and vice versa for some time.
And police were called, but I never saw any police because I was called before I was called enough to see the doctor. And he said, "Well, you're very fortunate. I can't do anything about this." He said, "But you brought trouble on your own head," which I suppose I did in the long run because it didn't work out. Because Ron wasn't on any medication, so eventually he had to go back to Long Grove prison. But he had all the papers at the time, so it enhanced their reputation a bit.
Why Reggie done what he done to get him out of there was crazy to begin with, because Roddy needed medical attention. He's always needed medical attention.
Reg started the Double R Club. The Double R means Ron and Reg in Walthamstow, and Reg became, even then, very keen on celebrities.
The Double R Club, I was kind of married to it because I was there day and night. It suited me. I wanted to be a good club host, which I was, and everything suited me. Everything ran according to plan. Everyone used to buy me a gin and tonic. I buy them gin and tonic, and I was very happy. I didn't go out. I didn't used to go out a lot. I used to stay in most of the time and just enjoy myself and listen to music all day long with my jukebox.
Well, it was a big house, that's all the Double R was. I mean, it wasn't like a club at all, it was just 2 big rooms. And yet Reggie always loved that because it was the very first club that they'd actually owned.
How old were you then?
About 23, but I had the Double R Club, the Billiardhall, a little gambling club, Anwar's it was called, in Bow, and I had about 4 of them, all in a radius of a mile. So I used to have a good time there.
Esmeralda's was in Knightsbridge, and I think this was one of the things that led to their downfall, because they really, well, they were off their manner.
It was a big mistake, because instead of leaving it alone and keeping away from there and just popping their head in now and again, they took the East End to Knightsbridge.
You had second cousins to the Queen and all that going in there, all high people, all with something wrong with them. I'm sorry, you know, every one of them had something wrong with them. They liked boys, or if it was a woman, she'd be a lesbian or something like that, you know, cranky, all a lot of them. But Ronnie, you couldn't sit him amongst them type of people. You know, he would stick out like a sore thumb.
And I suppose the Knightsbridge set, they found it amusing to start with seeing all these scar faces and pug uglies roaming around. But they're sitting down with a East End cab driver and a lord and lady, somebody sitting the other side, you know. And then of course, when a few checks were made out and they were a bit late being honoured, the twins wouldn't 2 or 3 weeks go by and they would be around putting pickaxes through Rolls Royces and things like that, you know.
The next club they had was the Kentucky, which had a big splash there, a lot of celebrities there. They knew one thing about them, they did know a lot of good top celebrities, you know what I mean? Judy Garland, as you know, all them sort of people.
It was always packed 7 days a week, but again, the twins never earned no money out of clubs. Because the simple reason is everyone would come in, they was buying drinks for.
They put their money about, they had no sense with money. Money was worthless to them. They just spent there as fast as they got it and give it away. If you said to him, I like your watch, he'd take it off and give it to you. Ronnie, he was so generous in that way, you know.
For Ronnie, it was never really about money. For Reggie, it was really about money. Reggie wanted to be an adept businessman. Ronnie would never allow it. Ronnie would go to where they were working and he would take whatever he wanted, whatever it was, right? If they had £200 in the till, he'd give me £150.
They had loads of clubs in the finish like pissholes, not like clubs at all, you know? Unauthorised spills where the gambling went on.
And they had what Albert used to call the milk round. He used to go and collect the money from all these places. And of course, then they got in, when the Americans come over, the Americans expected to pay a little bit of, I don't know what you call protection money, but it was just, you know, sort of favour money to keep all their nuisances out. If they had any problems and knockers and upsetting their clubs, they could call on the twins.
One big payment was a quarterly payment from the colony in Mayfair, paid by the mafia, and they was paying, I think, £3,500 a quarter to keep us out. They thought we were too thuggish. Mafioso talking like that.
It suddenly clicked in my mind. Ronnie thinks it's George Raft. And Ronnie, I think, was in love with him. But everything he did, his way of dressing, his gestures, his way of speaking, everything was George Raft, and that's what he thought he was.
What was George Raft like?
I found him a smashing fella, yeah. I liked him. He's no different to the films, and he's just like he was on the films, really.
And there they all were, in this background of 60s culture booming around the West End and the Chelsea set and this whole area. And they were this weird pair. And the weirdest of the two was Ron, and he became weirder and weirder and more popular, more and more talked about. Well, popular, he was talked about, he was feared, he was an unbelievable character.
If a famous personality was coming from abroad or anything like that, they would take it on their back to meet them and be seen with them, to be photographed with them. And that in itself makes them a personality in their own right.
How did you feel when you met people like Joe Louis?
I enjoyed meeting them a lot because they were my boyhood heroes, and when I met them I was very pleased to meet them. And when the press have made a big thing of this since then, I can't understand their reasoning, because I'm sure everyone would like to meet Joe Louis. whether it be present world champion today or tomorrow, or whenever, past, present or future.
If they was out on an evening time, they'd want to have their photo done with a star or something like that, to keep them up the front, like, that's all it was.
They'd always wanted to be somebodies. I mean, I always remember old Ron, his great remark was, you know, better a somebody than a nobody.
It was like a family home, you know, and it was just a small little terraced house, and the twins and the mum and dad slept upstairs. There was a front room and a little kitchen, you know, it was a tiny little place.
It was the cleanest, most polished house I've ever seen, and decorated in the style of a canal longboat, with pictures of Rochester Castle and roses and, you know, the traditional type of decoration. Lots of polished brass. Each interior door had a white lace curtain over it, tied back with pink bows. It was something unique.
There was a superabundance of kitsch. I've never seen so much, including this wonderful mirror shaped like a guitar hanging from one wall over the sideboard.
Fort Valence, that was the nickname. Sometimes you deserved it because they had everything in there, guns, knives, you name it, you know.
I went to Fort Valence on one occasion. After we'd had a victory in the magistrates' court, I went back with my instructing solicitor's managing clerk, who was a wonderful old character called Paddy Pakenham, who knew all the East End villains, and we had tea, and Violet gave us tea. And so I saw Fort Valence. It was an extraordinary experience because there was a conference going on in each room over different matters, and Violet presiding at the bottom in her curlers, and she brought tea and entrees up to each conference room.
Well, she was a lovely woman. She's a typical mum, East End mum. I used to take my kids around there, and she would get them by the hand and take them in the kitchen, give them something to eat and make them a sandwich, and she was a typical East End mother, and very kind and affectionate, and I mean she loved the twins like any mother. They can't see no harm in them, and obviously she must have worried about them and what they were doing, but I mean they never spoke in front of her. It was always in another room. Nothing was ever said in front of Violet.
At the end she must have sort of known what they was, you know, what they was up to and that, because the house was that small you couldn't really talk in there and she couldn't hear.
People used to come out of prison, say, and knock on the door at Valence Road. No one was ever turned away. No one. They always give them £20, which was a lot of money them days.
I've never seen anything like it, before or since. And it was Violet's pride and joy in her kingdom.
There's no question, Ronnie Kray didn't want to do anything other than be a gangster. He knew there was money in being a gangster, but the power was more important to him.
He wanted to be Legs Diamond, Al Capone. He wanted to be the Colonel, you know. He wanted to be feared by people. He loved being feared by people.
That was the kind of man that he was. When he was called the Colonel, he was the Colonel. Yeah, he had a little army of about 10 people. He could call on other people, but nothing to do with the firm.
They were fantasists too, so they loved gangster movies. They loved the idea of being gangsters. It was very interesting once. I remember asking Ron, I think, Ron, what books have you ever read that really influenced you? Got a very funny answer. He said, 2 books, he said. One was Boys Town, because it's all about boys and I like boys. And I said, what's the other one? He said, it's Anthony Nutting's book on General Gordon. He said, I love General Gordon, he's my hero. So I said, why? He said, because he was gay like me, and he faced overwhelming odds and died like a man.
Ronnie wanted Reggie to be like him. He wanted him to think like him, and Reggie wasn't that type of person. He wasn't. Reggie could have an argument with you, like everybody else, and he could hit you on the chin, walk away and forget completely about the argument. Ronnie couldn't do that. You know, Ronnie would, mentally, he would want to really hurt you, and hurt you bad.
And Ron was terrifying. He wanted to be. He really could look so evil. I mean, just hear Ron say, "You cunt," was in a way no one has ever said it in my life before.
You wouldn't insult Ronnie. You wouldn't say one word about Ronnie. Because if he heard of it, he would come looking for you, yeah.
He'd have a couple of midgets that come along, you know, because he had a touch of circus, the thing of old East End circus stuff, you see. And these midgets would come and say, "Hello," they'd say, you know, "we're friends of Reggie and Ronnie. If you don't tell the truth about us, we'll kill you." Bang, bang, you see. And the pub would roar with laughter at this.
Ronnie Kray was insane at certain times in his life. He suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, which isn't controlled by medication, is very dangerous.
He was partially sedated by an old East End doctor who I used to know, called Dr. Blasker, who used to prescribe pills to him, and they weren't the right pills, and Ron would come out of this state, but he wasn't properly sedated.
Blasker looked after him ever since he was about 17 onwards with pills, yeah, every single day. Well, it quietened him down, there's no two ways about that. I mean, from the raging lunatic, he would be sitting there like a zombie.
He wasn't the same person one day as he was the day before, you know. And the influence he had over Reg, in my opinion, was great, you know. And not only Reg, 90% of the other people in the East End that he worked with, you know.
Not so much Reggie, he wasn't too bad in that respect. It was Ronnie. Ronnie was looking for a kill.
Reggie was more businesslike, a bit more sensible, violent. Don't worry about that. He was a violent, vicious man, but it was more directed. There was more reason behind his violence. Where Ronnie done it for fun.
Went to Esmeralda's Barn in Knightsbridge. When I walked into a kitchen. Ronnie was standing opposite me as I walked in. And when he turned, that's when I see these, I called them pokers, but they were cold steels where they sharpened knives on. You know, he had them on the gas. And I thought to myself, hey, he's trying to fight me, like, you know what I mean? Anyway, he's come over with a poker and he started burning my hair off. You know, I had thick curly hair then. And he came up to me and he just went psh, like that, and then he put it across there. And then he took that poker back and he went back, got another one off, and he held it across my eyes there. And I shut my eyes then. So he said, open your fucking eyes, he's saying to me. Oh, so blimey. He said, now I'm going to burn your fucking eyes out. Now all this is melted now. And someone at the back, they just shouted out, no, Ron, not that. And he just, like that, switched off. He walked away. He said, right, you can go now, as if nothing had happened.
You had to be on your guard with Ronnie, like 99% of the time, you know? Because, as you say, he was never the same, you know, one day to the next.
Ronnie gave me a gun in a club in the West End. He wanted Connie to be shot. He said, don't shoot him to kill him, shoot him in the legs. Connie was in the toilet then. And I went in there and I said, Ronnie wants you shot. There's the gun. Got out of the toilet quick, and that was it. I went back and I says, he's gone out. But there was many a time that Ronnie and Reggie spoke about knocking Connie off.
A week later, he'd change his mind, and Connie would be back on the firm. That is how the Colonel, Ronnie Kray, carried on. Just lunatic.
Ronnie was getting too violent, and all Ronnie wanted to do is hurt everybody, you know. Couldn't be happy to get up and have a night out or a day out without someone's got to get hurt somewhere through some ludicrous thing, you know.
I walked up to the bar and stood there, said hello to a few people who I recognised, bought a drink, and I noticed people drifting away from him, left and right, and I knew something was going on. I turned around and Reggie's trying to cop an automatic pistol, if you don't mind. The next thing I know, bang, I'm shot in the leg.
Times and time again when we went to clubs, if Ronnie seen a stranger coming into his domain, he didn't like it. He would make a point of going over and sticking one right on him, and it didn't stop there. It was a kicking. We all stood by. We didn't grab Ronnie because Ronnie would do you. And Ronnie was a nutter.
I'd met a man named David Litvinoff who had upset them. He was a good informant of ours, but we didn't run his name in the paper. He told us a lot of what had gone on. Litvinoff had his mouth widened with a sword. I understand that Ronnie had held it in two hands and done that to his mouth while somebody else was holding him still, and widened his mouth. And it was a gesture that he'd made to enforce something that David Litvinoff had said, and it was a case of, well, if you're going to use your mouth like that as a big mouth, I'll show you what a big mouth looks like, and cut his face nearly ear to ear. The extraordinary thing is that David Litvinoff was in hospital. 2 days later, Ronnie came and visited him, brought him flowers, and said, "Hope you're all right, hope you'll recover soon." That was the man.
Ronnie was in this club, and the guy came up to him and said, "Hello, Ron, how are you doing? You're putting a bit of weight on, aren't you?" And Ronnie made some remark, then went out of the club, got in his car and was driven off, and he said, "Hang on, turn round." And they turned around and went back. It just shows how cold and calculated and then anticipatory he was about what he was going to do, because he went back into the club and he said, "Come here, you." Took him in the toilet and striped him down both cheeks. And they called this guy Tramlines. That was his name after that.
Some people nearly died. We would have to wrap them up and something to sort of stem the blood, and then take them, drop them outside the London hospital or something. And that was regular thing.
Little Mickey Morris, they beat the life out of him, like the two of them, you know, for no reason whatsoever.
A young fighter, young ex-fighter, one of Ronnie's ex-boyfriends, again upset him for some reason, and he just took a Gurkha knife and just started hacking into him. Practically killed the kid. Face, head, hand, back, wherever it was possible to hit him. I think he wrapped him in a bed quilt of some sort, and again dumped him outside the hospital. Could have died from loss of blood if he hadn't been picked up straight away.
I mean, they were always fighting. Ronnie and Reggie was always fighting. If the crowd was round the pub like that and Ronnie and Reggie was there, if an argument was starting between Ronnie and Reggie, the crowd would gradually move right out of the way. They didn't want to get involved. If they got involved, the two of them would turn on them. That's how they were.
They might be raring about something on the morning, and they'd come in the snooker room. Then all of a sudden, one or the other would start lashing out at the other one. They'd be fighting, yeah.
When they were round, they were like two girls around, you know, like your sisters over boyfriends or makeup or something like that, their brooms. They just used to scream and shout at each other.
One day Ronnie was having a go about Reggie's wife, and Nobby Clark, fool as he is, joined in. So now, nothing was done straight away. They didn't work like that. It would register, and they would save it up, use it when it was time.
Between 12 and 2 in the morning, Reggie was stinking drunk, and Ronnie kept going at him and saying, "Why don't you go over and get that little bastard? Go on, get a gun and go and shoot him." So we went over there. Nobby's coming down the stairs, and I said, "What are you doing this time of night? What do you want? What do you want? Can't you see me in the morning?" He never dreamt what was going to happen next. Reggie put the gun up to shoot his head off. I got a hold of Nobby and I punched him, and he fell down. Reggie shot him, but it ended up going in his foot or his leg.
It's very difficult to apologise in some cases, but not in others. But I suppose if I've been a bit too violent over the years, I will make some apology about it, but there's little I can do about it now. So again, it's no good reflecting back. It's pointless, negative.
I think Frances had a raw deal. She'd have been better off not to even got with Reggie in the beginning, because you can't take a person from normal environment and put her into an environment like that. Before they even got engaged or anything, I was on a boat with him going to France, and he'd bought her a lovely necklace, and they had a row, and invariably their rows was only over the family and the way that they treated Frances, and she had a good reason to. You know, they didn't treat her nice at all. And what happened was she ripped the necklace off and threw it overboard. Frances wanted a different life, and she didn't want to be out all night long in clubs and things like that. You know, she didn't want that.
Lewis Chester, a colleague of mine, and I went to the wedding of Reggie Kray and Frances Shea. Reggie entered with his bride, and a hymn was struck up by the organist, which the congregation didn't know. I could see Ronnie Kray, who was best man, becoming very fidgety in his pew, and he kept turning round with an irascible look in his face. The organist played on, and Ronnie finally got up and strode down the aisle, and he said in the loudest stage whisper, "Sing, fuck you, sing."
They wasn't left alone to be husband and wife. He couldn't stay another night like an ordinary person could. It'd be a phone call and he'd have to go to this pub or that club, and you know, or Ronnie would want him, and it was like really having a if you're married into a big family, having a family interfering in your marriage, and that's what it was like with him and Ron, you know.
The hostility was there, continuous, because Ronnie used to really go to town with her, you know.
Frances was a very beautiful and nice looking girl, but unfortunately in early age, about 21, she started getting some mental problems, and it led to suicide.
Reggie told me he didn't know how to touch a woman to excite her. Didn't want to hurt her. So he said, didn't want to hurt her, didn't know how to touch her. It's a shame, you know.
Frances' mother revealed that her daughter's marriage to Reggie Kray had never been consummated. The marriage quickly fell apart.
When she broke up from him, I had to drive Reggie round to that house 4 or 5 times a week, and he used to throw little stones up at the window. She wouldn't come to the window a few times, but then once or twice she would come, and we'd just go away and leave me alone. She just didn't want it on.
I got 5 in nursing home in Kennington. I've done everything I could. 2 luxury flats. It just wasn't meant to be. I had cars, I had no financial problems, but it just wasn't going to work out.
Massive show funeral. Buried her in a wedding dress. Open coffin. My main job on that day was to make a note of everybody who we knew who hadn't sent flowers, which I thought was pretty sick myself. There you go.
When Frances died, Reggie lived in our house for about 9 months, you know. And like we tried to help him through his bereavement, you know. I think he was so much in love with her, it just, it really broke his heart, when she died.
Reggie thought so much of Frances, his life ended. That's the way he looked at it. Told me so out of his own mouth.
She had attempted it on a previous occasion or 2, But of course, you never get over the shock of someone committing suicide.
For some time, the Krays had been competing with a rival firm from South London, the Richardsons. An all-out gang war was imminent.
Ronnie always wanted to shoot somebody who was in the firm from across the water. He hated the Richardsons, absolutely hated them. He always thought that the Richardsons would come along with the guns and there'd been a right shootout.
We'd all been paired off, given a name, an address, where they drank, girlfriend's house, wife's house, all that information. And we were just waiting for the off.
The call to arms never came. The Richardson gang were involved in a shootout at Mr. Smith's club in South London.
There was a desperate fight in March 1955 between Eddie Richardson and Frankie Fraser, who were business partners on the one hand, and some people called the Haywards and their friends on the other. More or less everybody who'd been in the club was charged with a fray, and that took out really most of the Richardson, if I can say, team.
George Cornell was one member of the Richardson gang not present at the shooting.
When the Richardsons went down, that's when they went after Georgie, you know. But I don't think they'd have done it if the Richardsons wasn't in prison, you know, because he was on his own now. All the others were away, so the brave Krays come out after one man with their guns again, like, you know.
There was about one time Long was very friendly with George Cornell, but they had their differences. I don't know if my anger was as deep as his when the murder happened.
He was on the pavement fighter, George. He could have a rat, George. Yeah, couldn't he, Tom? He could, yeah. And he had no fear. He was the only man, I swear to God, that I ever see. He came into the Grave Morris pub, you know, one day, and Ronnie's with his little boys, you understand, and he came in on his own. The firm are there, if you like, all the crap, and they went to get him a drink, and he went, no, he said, I don't drink with you and your little puffs. And had his drink and walked out. But it wasn't long after that the old nail was gone in the coffin, you know what I mean, and it was he was on top for him, you know what I mean.
What happened was the next night, after the fight, Cornell goes to visit a man in hospital in North London, and whether out of bravado, whether out of just recklessness, or whether he'd never thought anything was going to happen at all, goes into the Blind Beggar.
Ronnie Kray went to the pub with Ian Barry and Scott Jack Dixon and shot Cornell dead.
He says, drive me up to the Blind Beggars. So as we're going up there, he sticks a gun in Ian's hand and says, here, put that in your pocket. And he tells me where to pull up. He goes in, he couldn't have been in there any more than about 3-4 minutes. The guns went off. Ian didn't know what to do. He took the gun out and he shot at the ceiling. I could never understand why he went down for murder. Ronnie gets into the car, so you're laughing his head off. I've done it. I've actually shot him. I've shot that bastard Cornell.
Well, I just told Long not to be in such an hurry, but he was in an hurry, and he was back in 10 minutes later, and that was it, and been done.
Why was he in such a hurry, Rich?
Because he'd made up his mind, and once he made up his mind, nothing would change him, made up his mind.
I just done the bastard, he said. Drinking in our manner. Took it as a bit of an insult. He was quite convinced that he'd done the right thing and sorted him out.
I know Charlie Richardson in his book said that Ron needed his sacrificial victim. And I think, you know, Charlie Richardson, who was a smart guy, he got it right. I think he was his sacrificial victim.
To get shot for calling someone a fat puff, wow, that just shows you the state of Ronnie's mind in the end, you know.
We had a girl, a nurse in a London hospital, giving us hourly updates. And she told us that he'd been transferred to another hospital, neurological unit. Then I think it was about 3:30 in the morning, we got the message he's died after all. A little cheer went up from the crowd. And that was it. That was the end of Cornell.
After Ron had killed Cornell, what does he do? He goes into his flat, holes up, hiding from where he thinks is after him. In fact, they weren't after him, playing records of Winston Churchill's wartime speeches. Well, that's no normal murderer. That's very weird. And they were weird.
Everybody and his friend knew Ronnie Kray shot Cornell. He didn't hide it. The authorities knew. They couldn't find anybody to pin it on because lack of witnesses.
Cornell, there was no point in shooting the poor bugger. No point at all. You know, the war, supposed war with the Richardsons was over because the Richardsons were all in the nick by then, so there's no point in going and shooting him, in the blind beggar. But it was necessary for the cult.
By December 1966, the Krays felt invincible. To enhance their growing reputation, they hatched an audacious plan to spring one of England's most dangerous criminals from Dartmoor prison, Frank Mitchell, the Mad Axeman.
He had been in the system since he was about 12, and he'd never been out of it. His first conviction was for stealing a fairy cycle. And the dreadful thing was that from that moment, his life had a ghastly inevitability in it. He went to industrial school, it was called in those days, but what now would be a secure accommodation. And then he went to Borstal, and he went through the system. He never got out, but every time he entered a new institution, he got into more trouble within the institution.
He'd been flogged and birched and incarcerated for most of his adult life, the most recalcitrant of all prison offenders, and then had suddenly turned completely into a cooperative and yielding kind of a prisoner, so that he was able to go on to a working party.
For a con, he had a pretty good life in Dartmoor. Come and go as you pleased. They give him a sort of free rein. Like letting him feed the ponies.
So they were taking girls down there so that Frank Mitchell could enjoy them, and they were taking money down there so that he could go off. And when he was supposed to be working on fences or under the supervision of a prison officer, he was off to Tavistock to buy another budgie.
Most people, they say, oh, I'll be out in 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever. They know their release date, but Mitchell didn't. He was complaining about this, and Ronnie said, don't worry, we'll get you out. Come and work with us.
Mitchell was to be brought out of prison to join the gang in order to give weight to their firm when they enjoined in their battle with the Richardsons. In March, the Richardsons had this fracas in the Mr. Smith's Club, and they were all wiped up, and so the need to bring Mitchell out was gone.
On December 12th, 1966, the twins sent Albert Donoghue and Teddy Smith to the West Country to pick up Mitchell off the moor.
The day we picked Mitchell up, we came up from London, came off the Exeter Road, over the hill here, parked up here, as was already planned. But in actual fact, we didn't think it was going to happen. But Teddy Smith went in the phone box to the reason for being here. It about 20 minutes, and then Big Frank strolled round the bend here, as though he owned the place. In the car, got him changed, took a big, bloody great Tarzan type knife off him. Then we packed all his prison gear up and chucked it over a hedge, where it was found a couple of days later. And we were home in London before it was on the radio.
The authorities launched a massive search. The Krays arranged for Mitchell to hide out in a flat tended by Scott Jack Dixon.
He was already in the flat when I went in. I put my hand out as if he was a long-lost friend, because we'd already heard so much about Frank. He was a giant of a fella, but simple in his ways. I dare say that you couldn't pick a fight with a man like him.
I don't know why the twins thought they could control him when all the authorities psychiatrists, mental institutions, Rampton, Broadmoor, they'd all failed. But they, for some reason, thought they could control him. But they couldn't. Met Teddy Smith, who was the driver on the Dartmoor pickup. He fancied himself as a bit of an author, and he would go there every day and write these letters to various newspapers, politicians and that sort of thing.
All we wanted was a few letters to go to the newspapers and say, I'm quite prepared to come back if I get a release date. When we got the first letter printed in the newspaper, so I bought papers and fetched them back in. And I said, look, you're in the news again. Oh, great. Oh, they'll soon give me a date. No, that's it. Poor soul never got a date. The days went by and he was getting restless. Very, very restless. Anyway, I went and seen Reggie. I said, Reggie, somebody's got to come over and see him. He's doing his nut and he wants to see one of the twins.
Just said, would you like a young girl, Frank? Calm him down. And he said, oh yeah.
She was an hostess, and like many hostesses, unfortunately, like prostitutes. So she was there to give him a service, and which she agreed, and she got paid for it.
Once he got the girl, most of the time he stayed in bed having sex. He used to get the meals in bed, both of them. And Frank fell in love with her, and in a way she liked Frank.
They say she was kidnapped. She could have left that flat. It was only an ordinary council flat. She could have left there any time she wished to. I mean, he had to sleep, and while he was asleep she could have got up and walked out the door.
We wouldn't allow her to use the phone. She was a prisoner. Not that she knew about being a prisoner, but she was a prisoner because Frank didn't want her to go.
And he started getting a bit edgy, and he said if the twins didn't come and see him, he'd go and see them. He knew where they lived because he'd been writing to him when he was away, and they took this as a threat. And this plot was hatched to get rid of him.
They had their reputation to live up to, and if they offered him up to the police and got him arrested, sent back to prison, how would that look and how would that stand? So Ronnie being Ronnie, he wanted him to disappear off the face of the earth. I could perform these sort of tasks without any problems, and I've always said, but this is the last one from when I said, I'm not getting involved in any more after this, this is it. I said, do this one favour for me, And it was Christmas, building up to Christmas week, and I've got a business to run, I've got kids, I've got the booze to look after, and all the things that were going on at the time, bits of aggro indoors. I mean, you get all this, and this is on top of it all. It's the last thing I wanted, I needed to do or be asked to do. I was very reluctant, really, but they gave me word. I said I'd do it, I'd take care of it.
It was a plot between Charlie, Reggie, Freddie Foreman. I was present in the house, but not in the room. There was another guy, the guy who owned the house. And then they came out. Charlie came to me. He said, I want you to meet Freddie, Canning Town Bridge. Make arrangements to get Mitchell out of the flat, because he trusted me, because I got him off the moor. So I was used to get him out of the flat, separate him from the girl. Telling me he's going to the country to have Christmas with Ronnie. And Ronnie don't want any women running around the place. He went for that. Led him out of the flat, into the van.
He left the flat with Frank Mitchell and walked round the corner, and he was to just put him in the back of the van and go back to the flat. Why? For whatever reason he climbed up in the front, I don't know, because he wasn't supposed to do that.
On the left hand side is Freddie Foreman and Elfie Gerrard. Callaghan gets in the passenger seat. Once the door slammed, they started firing. Then Mitchell's still moving and groaning on the floor. So Gerard said, "I'm empty, give him another one, Fred." Now he leaned forward and done him behind the ear.
The situation in the van got out of hand, and it had to be done there and then.
Yeah.
It wasn't the plan. The plan was to get well down the road. But things don't always work out as you expect.
We all heard the shots, and we commented on it. Well, Lisa was the first. She screamed, "They've shot him, they've shot him." She wasn't a fool, the girl.
I got out of the van all right, walked away. Still wasn't quite sure whether I'd get one in the back of the nut or not. But
5 minutes, maybe less than that, Albert come back and says, "He's gone now. Get your gear, Lisa. I'm taking you to Reggie." But Albert assured her, nothing will happen to you.
I briefed her. I said, "When you go and talk to Reggie, don't mention bangs, otherwise you'll go swimming." I said, "You just go there and say, where do you think Frank's gone? Say he's gone to the country to be with Ronnie." That's what he told me. And leave it at that. If you start talking about bangs, it's all over. Anyway, she passed that little interview. And she survived.
He cried. Yeah. So that's how much Reggie knew about it. He broke down and sat on the stairs and cried.
11 days after Mitchell's escape from Dartmoor, Foreman, with the help of a trawlerman, disposed of the body at sea. Ronnie's thirst for murder was out of control. Reggie found it increasingly difficult to resist Ron's violent demands. In October 1967, matters came to a head. A local villain, Jack the Hat McVitie, had upset the twins and was unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I didn't like the fellow McVitie. I want to get rid of him. Oh, he did everything wrong. He's very uncouth. Very uncouth. He's loud and aggressive, which I find is a vexation to the spirit. And indeed, he was just something that was stood for everything I despised.
Whenever I see the film Mean Streets with De Niro playing the part of the guy with a hat who causes all this mayhem, that's Jack the Hat, that character. When I look at it, completely untrustworthy.
He didn't care tuppence about them, Jack. He wasn't frightened of them. No. And this is where he was an embarrassment to them. The Krays tried to put him down, like, oh, he's nothing, like he's a drunk and a tuppeny halfpenny thief, and he was a bloody good thief.
I like Jack. He's a character. And he won a grass.
He could be very violent, but he's more of a sort of joker than a serious person, you know.
Jack was a nuisance, there's no doubt about it. He was a pest, and he everywhere he went there was a trail of destruction behind him, and he was on those dexedrine tablets, those little pills that was about in those days, and just another form of speed. And he was speeding every day, morning, noon and night, I remember going round to his house once for some reason, I don't know why, and I sat there to have a cup of tea opposite the fireplace, and I looked up over the top of the fireplace, and there's all these bullet holes in the fire, in the chimney breast. And I said to his wife, I said, what's all that? What's happening? He said, oh, that's when he gets drunk. He lets go at the chimney, with a shooter. So I thought,
We was in the Carpenter's Arms, a pub bed then, at the time of the East End. And there was no sign of any agitation, no problem. There was Ronnie, Reggie, it was all there. Even their parents were there. So there was no thing, and we left with two other men, me and my brother. And by chance, we happened to go to the Regency.
Who should turn up? Jack the Hat. Let's have a drink and all the rest of it. No, we're all right, Jack. And so there's loads of people.
I get a phone call from my doorman saying Reggie's in the foyer, could I go and see him? He's got Ronnie Hart and Ronnie Bender with him. So he said, Jack's downstairs. He said, I'm going to kill him.
So the next day I'm called upstairs in the office by Tony Barry, and there was Reggie and Ronnie Hart. He just says, we want to see Jack. Is he down? I went, yeah. I'll bring him to a party. But at no time did I know anything was going to happen.
Tony Lumbiana's gone back to look after Jack the Hat. Reggie's pulled a gun out in the office and said, look after that. He's give me the gun. As he did that, Ronnie Hart's pulled out a great big dagger, like a great big kitchen knife, and said, yeah, hold that as well. So I put them in the office drawer. About 15 minutes later, Hart's come back. He asked me for the knife then. I gave him the knife. Said, Reggie wants you to take the gun round to Blonde Carroll's. So I said, well, if you don't take it round there, Reggie's going to come back and he's going to shoot Jack in your club. Well, we knocked on Blonde Carroll's door. Go down to the basement. I handed Reggie the gun. I've gone back to the club. Jack goes round to the party. And that was the last we saw of Jack. But the terrible thing about it is that it's really Tony Lumbiano who's the Judas in this whole saga. Without him, Jack would probably still be alive.
I would never put myself in that position again. It was wrong what happened to Jack the Hat. I'm going to say that. It wasn't very nice. He didn't deserve that. You know, if they had that argument with him, don't involve no one else.
We go along to Blonde Carroll's, thinking there's going to be this party, going to have a bit of a time there and get on to the West End. We go down the steps, go into the room, Jack runs in, where's the party?
I see Ronnie standing there, and these two fellas dancing. And all Ronnie did was bars past me, hit him with a little glass along there, and went, fuck off you cunt, I've had enough of you.
Bit of an argument starts between Reggie and Jack. Reggie pulls a gun out. I think he's going to frighten him, you understand? Goes click, nothing works.
That was the first time I seen the gun. That time I seen nothing. And it didn't seem to me that they knew what they were doing.
I thought I'd been pushed into it too quick. Because to me, it's common sense to wait a bit longer. I don't say you can prolong a thing like that forever. I see it's getting a bit close, but so it's still debatable, but so I had a lot of frustration in me and anger. Probably more anger that night than the other night in my life.
I can't handle it. I walk out the room and Connie White comes to me. I'm really upset. I'm torn between frustration, anger.
Well, they said that Ronnie was urging him on doing comedy. It was not Ronnie Kray. I had no need to protect Ronnie Kray from anything. It was Ronnie Hart who held him. And he had him right behind, he had his arms pinned back and was urging ready to do it.
I can't go to Jack's rescue. If you want to know what I really felt, I felt a coward. It's hard.
I never seen a knife. I don't know where the knife come from. It was over before it happened.
And Ronnie came out and said, what's the matter with him? And Connie said, well, he's upset about all this. Ronnie said, take him home.
It didn't seem real. It didn't seem real. And next thing is, cool, people are going everywhere.
An act of anger, rage, and frustration, because I really did want to hold it up a bit and do it a bit more neater than I did, but I never got around to it. So the night was destroyed from early on, really. Should have been done different, but it wasn't.
What happened between him leaving that pub and meeting him at the Regency? Something happened in that short period of time, within an hour.
I had a bit of an argument with Ron, didn't I? I had a conflict with Ron, didn't I? And it spurred me on, you know.
The guy was at the edge of a nervous breakdown. His wife had just killed herself. He was drunk, he was drugged, he was dominated by his homicidal old twin, these were all the things that it was about.
He stood there, and the words he says to me, "Fucking get rid of that fry under the train." That was it. Now I'm in the picture, fully in the picture, and it's not even my argument. Nothing to do with me. If it was something wrong with him, yeah.
Well, a lot of the people around, I think, were involved, and they were drinking too much. A lot of the other characters in the scene, who I won't name, I think a lot of other people do. It was a mess. It was something that got out of hand. It should have been controlled. Shouldn't have happened.
McVitie was stabbed to death. The Lambriano brothers, along with Ronnie Bender, were left to clean up any trace of the murder.
I went upstairs and there were two little kids asleep, Long Carol's children, and I went in there. I gently took the eiderdown off their bed. Not a duvet, they had a kind of a cover. There were blankets underneath it, and I took it downstairs, closed the door gently, took it downstairs.
There he's lying on the floor. Now what do you do?
We rolled him over, and underneath him was all this congealed. The nearest I can think what it was like was if you went along to the butcher's and you bought some liver. There was all this kind of livery stuff, a lot of it and all, which was like congealed blood.
And we wrapped him up in the night down and got him up the top of the stairs and got him in the back of his motor.
Put the body on the back seat of the car, locked the doors. Then we went back into the house, finished up doing what we had to do. Then came the time of a big question mark: who was going to drive him away?
There was an argument about who was going to drive him away. And rather than argue, I said, "I'll fucking do it."
Amongst all that madness that night, for somebody to say, "I'll drive that car over to South London," you took a lot of courage to get behind the wheel of that car.
They followed me, and we just wanted to get rid of it. No set plan to put it anywhere.
We lose him coming up out the tunnel, and it's fairly ironic this, that we drive around for maybe about 20 minutes looking for Tony, and we finally found him. The car, Jack the Hat's car, had run out of petrol right outside a church.
When they left it there, they went back to told Ronnie. That's when he screamed his head off. You've put it right on Fred's doorstep, which makes me implicated me. And then knowing that I'd had a row with Jack at the casino when he pulled a knife on a croupier some months earlier.
It just seemed that over South London there wasn't a lot of love lost between us, that it could be left over there and there'd been a killing in South London. The police would be looking there rather than in the East End.
By coincidence, it could have been anywhere. It could have been anywhere. To me, that was another world, nothing to do with me. It was never done. It was just one of them things.
We dropped Ronnie Bender off at over at the other side of the Blackwall Tunnel down in Popular. What we weren't to know, that Ronnie went and found Charlie Kray and told him he'd done it all. We weren't mentioned. Instead of getting a pat on the head, Charlie blows his nut, because whatever, he didn't want that body over the East End, over the South London. That put it firmly on somebody else's doorstep, on Freddie Foreman's.
Again, Freddie Foreman was asked to dispose of the body. Reggie had committed a very public murder.
It was Cowley and Hart who came over to my pub, knocked on the door and got me out of bed and said, "There's a car been dumped, Jack's body in it." And so I had to break into the car because the car had been locked and the keys had been thrown away. And it was just breaking daylight with the rain. It was rain. Thankfully, it was a rainy morning. And I looked in the back, and anyone walking by the car would see that there's a body laying on the back seat. I mean, it's only wrapped up, but the shape of the person was there. And there was all the old cleaners going to work that time in the morning, but they had their heads down because of the rain, So that was convenient. Switched lights on. And my pal was across the road, tailing me off, minding me off, and I got it going, I got the car going, and the windscreen wipers wouldn't work. Oh, well, that's nice. It was a wreck, the car was a wreck. So I took a liberty with myself driving that away from there. Took him down the New Haven way to put him out to sea. So he had the burial at sea, and I saw the condition of him, and there was none of this cutting throats and pinning him to the floorboards and things. So he had a couple of stab wounds in his back and front. You know, it wasn't as bad as gruesome as what they portrayed.
And I fully expected it to be found the next day. And when it never got found, it didn't happen. You start to think that way. It baffled me.
I was within the week, within that few days, couple of days. That was history, if you like. You know what I mean? Them sort of things, they spread, you know, like wildfire. You know what I mean?
About a week later, we had a meet. They'd gone up to Suffolk apparently, and come back, and we had a meet with them in the Carpenter's Arms, and that's all it was said about it. We asked why, and he says he was just a fucking nuisance.
On the morning of May 9th, 1968, the Kray twins and other members of the firm were arrested by Nipper Read and his team and charged with the murders of George Cornell, Frank Mitchell and Jack the Hat McVitie. The trial of the Old Bailey was presided over by Justice Melford Stevenson and became one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials in English legal history.
When I started the investigation, I'd become a superintendent and posted to the murder squad. I'd made it. And then I went in to see the assistant commissioner, and he said to me, congratulations. Now, Mr. Reed, he said, I want you to do the Krays.
I do know that I'm told anyway, and I'm pretty sure it's correct, that there's orders from the very top people to lock us away. And make sure we were locked away.
I think we thought the best evidence probably was Cornell. If we won that and then went on to McVitie, the publicity that was associated with the first trial was such that it could be said we couldn't get a fair trial on the second one. And that was the arrangement that we said, well, we'll join the two murders and we'll leave Mitchell out, and then we'll have a separate trial for Mitchell. And that's what we did.
Well, I think it's all meant to intermingle. That was the idea of it. So it would overlap, each trial would overlap another one. Each case would overlap and throw some badness off.
Did your counsel ever suggest that you should have had separate trials?
There was some mention of it, but not enough.
It was quite obvious they should have been tried separately. And not only did I move the court, move Milford, he should try them separately, but I got him to stop the trial so that I could take the case to the Court of Appeal. But they likewise refused. Backroom talk with the Court of Appeal judges, clerks. The government behind this, and the Court of Appeal weren't going to interfere.
Really, it was the fact that these two murders were alike in so many ways, because they'd been committed by criminals who were conjoined, not only because they were brothers and twins, but because they were leading the same gang, and that there was the same motive, or there was the lack of motive that impelled us to say, well, there is a relationship between the two that can be established, and it was accepted.
I think they had a good chance of getting off if they'd been tried separately, and I don't mean the two twins separately, but the two murders separately.
There were 10 men in the dock. Only 2, Ronnie Kray and Ian Barry, were on trial for the murder of George Cornell. The remaining 8 men sat in front of the jury, awaiting their trial for the murder of Jack McVitie.
Ian Barry had to sit through the whole trial of the evidence against the gruesome evidence in the case of McVitie. It was nothing to do with them, and similarly, the other defendants like Bender, Whitehead, the Lambrianos had to sit through something that didn't concern them at all. And of course, in my view, it was tainted and prejudicial. I don't think it's happened since or would ever happen again.
Well, it's one of the great trials of the 20th century. One of the great criminal trials. It's a great show trial. It was a mafia trial. And they conducted like a mafia trial right from the very beginning when the police convoy brought them into the Old Bailey.
Each of the jurors had a policeman to be responsible for him. The convoy coming up from, I think it was Brixton Prison every day, was enormous, sirens every day. It had been announced before the trial that it would take a different route each day for security.
It was really the police, or the Home Office through the police, trying to pretend to the jury that they were likely to be mobbed at any moment by someone representative of this gang. And the mere fact that the leaders were all in jail and all on trial didn't mean there wasn't a big gang threatening them all the time.
The security that was adopted in bringing them to court and taking them away was absolutely necessary. We were talking about two people and a gang who committed brutal murders, and there was no possibility that they could be allowed to be conveyed to court in any other way.
Oh, it's incredible. Sirens and motorbikes. I mean, they used to start. We used to get to the Old Bailey in record time, 16 minutes, I think, from Brixton Prison to the Old Bailey. These screaming sirens and motorbike outriders, the Krays are coming. There to be crowds everywhere.
And holding back 30 or 40 people at the end of the road. Don't go down there, it's too dangerous. We're all in a van for back there.
I'm sure that the jury and everybody around it was affected by the heavy security.
Of course it tainted the jury. I mean, all the whole circus must have tainted them.
And there's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes which we didn't know about. Like media coverage, which was it wasn't of our making.
Every single night the television had come on, the news, we'd be on the news. Every single night. Now, it was a trial by publicity.
Today, many judges would have reported newspapers and television for contempt. The Krays, in my view, were killed by publicity.
They're convicted before you even kick a ball. Game, set and match.
We made our own minds up that we're not going to be any part of them, which we wasn't. Yeah. And there was no way on God's earth that we're going to use their solicitor or their barristers. And so we picked our barrister and our solicitor.
Farmer solicitors, a good solicitor.
And, we went our separate ways.
It was established early on by his counsel that he was going to give evidence, and the substance of that would be that he was under duress from the Krays during the whole of this exercise, and that took away from him his freedom of action.
Well, it was terrifying because there was 10 of us in the dock, and I was the only one there pleading for myself. The rest were as a mob, and I had to be really on my toes going in and out of the dock every day.
I think really and truly there was so much evidence against them. The twins should have put their hands up and said, look, we'll take it, because they was apparently offered the deal that you take it, like you put your hands up to it and all the rest can walk.
They expected them to go down with them. That was their sort of like a death wish they had, We're going down, you got to come down with us, we'll go together. That's not right. They wasn't responsible for what the twins did.
When each of them was arrested, I interviewed them and said, look, this is your one opportunity. You will never get another. I'm telling you now that I'm going to charge the Krays with murder, and there may be other cases as well. You've now got the opportunity, if you choose, to come on the side of law and order, to make a statement to me and tell me all you know about the Krays, and this is the only opportunity you'll get.
All of a sudden, you've got their own cousin, Ronnie Hart, done the right grassing anyway. He's told them exactly what's happened, and about half a dozen more of the so-called heavyweights on the firm have all grassed one another and grassed the twins.
Well, this was a disgusting trial in that sense, that the number of people who were singing, betraying, I mean, it was really grotesque. And people who I'd met 6 months before as staunch friends, buddies, allies, whatever they were, of the Krays, members of the firm, which is it was a load of nonsense. There was really no such thing. They were a rabble. But all these guys, and suddenly there they were, you know, large as life, saying how dreadful the Krays had been.
I pleaded guilty because I had no chance. The charge was harbouring Frank Mitchell. And I told him never read what it was all about. And then he says, "Can you tell me about the Cornell?" I said, "Yeah."
And Ronnie said, "We got Scotch Jack is going to take Cornell's murder. Ronnie Hart is going to take Jack the Hat, and we want you to take Frank Mitchell." So I thought about it just for a few seconds, and I said, "No, I never know."
Of course, you can't ask a man to do that. What sane man's got to say, yeah, I'll put my hands up to a murder and get a life sentence for something I've not committed? I mean, it's ridiculous to even think it, you know. Of course, he had to roll over.
The loyalty of all the other gang members is something that's quite remarkable. They did not want to dissociate themselves with the Krays and in that way appear unloyal, because this was the structure, this was the society.
We're loyal to the culture. We're loyal to the friends that we've always known, the people we drink with, the people we eat with, the people we piss and shit with. You understand? Not the Krays.
I put them before my own family. You know, Chris just had to go along with it, whether he liked it or not. That was his chosen path. I went down that road, and there was no going back.
They didn't have to go down. They could have done what Albert done and what I done. They thought, well, the twins will get us off with this. They've got good lawyers, good barristers, plenty of money about for them. God knows what they paid. The rest of them had to get legal aid.
Did your counsel ever suggest a diminished responsibility?
They done it indirectly. The message did come down the line, if I wanted diminished responsibility. But of course it would have been guilty to go with it first and deal with it afterwards.
And you didn't want that?
No.
Why?
Because there was nothing there. I think they just wanted me guilty. And morally, for me it wasn't right morally. I couldn't go against my own brother, so that was it.
So you think that if you'd have taken their offer, they then would have wanted you to damage Ronnie's case?
I'm sure that would have been the case, yeah.
No, diminished responsibility does not apply to someone who says I never did it. It's as one would say, there's an alibi and self-defense. You can't have both. If he said, yes, I did it, then we look into what the state of his mind was at the time. But he always denied he did any of the offences.
Justice Melford Stevenson was legendary for imposing long sentences with terse and often corrosive remarks. He had acquired a reputation as Britain's toughest judge, terrifying defendants and barristers alike.
I thought he was just the judge for the case. I was very impressed by him because he brooked no interference, he stood no nonsense, and he made sure that people knew that he was the judge, it was his trial and things were going to go as he wanted it, and they did, and I think the jury were very impressed by him.
The first day of the trial, we go in there and the defendants come up into the dock, and Mr. Justice Melford Stevenson actually has prepared, I think, 6x6 cardboard cutouts and expects each defendant to wear one round the neck with a number. I thought that was done purely to humiliate them, and in my view, very, very, very disgraceful.
He decided to put numbers on us with pink ribbons.
He said that they was confused with who was sitting in the dock. They sat there looking at us long enough for 6 months. They should, they knew who we were, all right.
He wanted to call us number 1 and number 2 and number whatever,
I was the first one to say, well, I think we're in a cattle market here, I didn't get these off, you're not putting that around my neck.
They arranged that all of them, on the count of 3, should take them off and throw them down. I remember them rehearsing this, telling us they're planning this and rehearsing it in the cells. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Throw them down, boy.
But unfortunately for me, my counsel said, Tony, don't take yours off. Because we're all like this, going to throw them. He said, no. And he begged me not to part with mine. And I had to sit there with mine while all the chaps started tearing theirs up.
I've been doing criminal law for nearly 40 years, and I have never come across any case where any judge has behaved in that manner. I'm sorry to say, judges are supposed to be the pillars of society. He was a High Court judge, and I think throughout the trial he treated everyone with contempt, besides the prosecution, but it was totally unfair.
Oh yes, he tried to undermine our points and to underscore the points made for the prosecution. There's no doubt of that, but that's within the scope of a wayward judge anyway.
If any good point was being said by defence or witness, the judge would turn to the jury and literally smirk and turn his eyebrows up. Things like that don't go on transcripts, unfortunately, and so it's very difficult to lodge an appeal on those grounds, but it happened. Everyone saw it.
Well, you hear that, members of the jury? A nod and a wink, as it were. You see what they're after. You see what the defence is after now. That sort of comment.
The judge was continuously rude to John Platsmills, quite unnecessarily, and I think it got to a stage one day Ronnie jumped up in the dock and shouted at the judge, "You leave him alone, he's doing all right."
The thing that struck me most at the time, which was quite odd, was the class aspect. I found something deeply unpleasant about it. It was much more than just a murder trial. It was as though the upper classes had rounded on these 2 upstarts and thought they'd teach them a jolly good lesson, which they did. I think Reggie was aware of what was going to happen to him at the trial. He certainly was. He looked absolutely haunted. He looked terrible. But Ronnie was as smug as a bug in a rug. Happy. I think he loved all the eyes upon him, yes. And you would have thought, the way he came in each day, came up the stairs and looked to the public gallery, as though he was in the theatre. I think he enjoyed it.
He said something like, "You can understand that if I wasn't here now, I'll be having tea with Judy Garland."
Ronnie saw me from the dock, and he wrote me a little note, which I've still got, because I thought it was so funny, saying, "Dear Miss Lethbridge, you are more beautiful than ever. When I get out of this, I'm going to take you to the moon."
Many a time during the trial, Ronnie was asleep in the afternoons, and he was asleep to the point that he was snoring. Reggie, on the other hand, was very intense and very attentive to everything.
Reggie went into the box and said that this was a conspiracy between Superintendent Reed and the Home Secretary to get the Krays put away. Well, even if that was a thought, it wasn't the way to introduce it.
He was always very particular throughout the case, before and after and during the trial, what the public thought of them. He always was concerned. What did they say about us outside?
Ronnie Kray couldn't make up his mind whether he was going to give evidence or not, and eventually the judge got a bit upset and said, "Now, Mr. Platsmills, is your client going into the witness box or not?" And then Ronnie shouted, "I'm going into the witness box," and in he went, and of course he made an utter fool of himself.
Yes, Ronnie should never have got into the witness box, because he just couldn't control his temper. In cross-examination about anything, he would flare up. He cut his own throat, really.
Ken Jones said to him, weren't you known as the Colonel? Isn't that a title that you've adopted for yourself? He said, that may or may not be, he said, but you're a fat slob.
Jones stood there and just let it sink in, and let it sink in with the jury, I'm sure, because Ronnie was screaming and excited and just showing himself to be the sort of man who would, on a whim, shoot or knife somebody. And I'm sure Jones enjoyed every bit of being called a slob at that moment. And I think we all know who the slob was, don't we? The fat slob by then, and he was fat, overweight, and not looking very good, was Ronnie Kray.
Ronnie was in the box. Milford said to him, "Mr. Kray, I think you've only said two things in the whole of your evidence. The first is the prosecutor's a big fat slob, and the next, that I'm prejudiced against you, because I certainly am."
Mr. Foreman, I want you to ask me simply by saying yes or no. Have you all reached a verdict in the case of Ronald Kray in the first indictment? Yes. Have you reached a second indictment? Yes. And then went back to say, and then how do you find Roger? And he said guilty. And then he said guilty. And I was looking down like this, and I couldn't look up. My eyes were full of tears. It was a bit of a, you know, all the work that we'd done was justified.
Ronnie Kray, 30 years. Ian Barry, 20 years. Ronnie Bender, 20 years. Reggie Kray, 30 years. Charles Kray, 10 years. Tony Barry, acquitted being under duress. Chris Lambriano, 15 years. Freddie Foreman, 10 years. Tony Lambriano, 15 years. Connie Whitehead, 7 years.
Well, the judge was so carried away by the duty he felt he had to put down the whole tribe that he dished out to the lesser members as well. I never thought that Milford would swing with such violence.
I wasn't surprised at the sentences in any way. A gang of people that had ruled the East End of London by a regime of terror and fear, had killed people coldly, analytically, motivelessly, in full view of other people, simply because they wanted to exercise their authority as gang leaders.
How old are you now?
66.
And how long you been in prison?
Just over 33 years.
33 years. So you've spent literally half your life in prison.
Reggie would have been in a place like this. This is a cell, it's not wide and it's not long, and you never felt the cold until you've been in somewhere like this. He might have had a few photographs and pictures on the wall, a bed there, maybe he'd been allowed a bed cover and a radio, and that would have been his total existence.
Day to day, that's how you live it. That's how you live it. You survive it, you come out of it, but you can never forget it.
I've seen a man killed over a small transistor radio. Man walked by me and said, "Good morning, Chris," and walked in the cell and murdered a man with a homemade knife in cold blood over a small transistor radio. What price life?
I had a certain amount of trouble there, and over the years I've done a certain amount of cons, inmates, for different reasons. So I had assaults on my record, done about 6 screws.
He had his fights with the screws when they first went away. He tried to kill himself. Ain't no one said about that, but he tried to kill himself because he was sick of the life he had in there.
Yeah, I currently missed in Long Larn prison on 2 occasions, one twice in Parkhurst. I think it was a severe depression at the time. I think I was on some medication, and its side effects, I believe, that done it. Side effects of the medication, Valium.
I don't think he meant to top himself. I think it was a cry, a terrible cry. Help me.
A man who does more than 10 years is changed for the worse, forever, I believe. An ordinary man of ordinary capacity, I think, is ruined by it. You've got to have some spark of genius, or maybe a political ideal.
Everyone sees it more than reasonable. If I'd have been out 15 years ago, at least the most, you see. But why I never, I can't explain.
If Reggie Kray had expressed complete remorse some years ago when his 30 years was up, then the probability is that he would have been allowed out.
I think it was everything, the books and the films and everything that had gone on around, and I do believe that when they sentenced Reg and Ron, and they sent them to prison, and they locked the doors, and they believed that they had well and truly thrown away the key, and that the next step would simply be obscurity. And in fact the exact opposite happened, and the media interest grew and the public fascination grew, and the Home Office found itself 27 years down the road with two men who had become incredibly famous.
The idea of somebody who's in prison becoming the subject matter of a film is deeply unpopular. I think it's felt that somehow, even if it isn't financially, they will benefit. And benefit by the fame, if that is a benefit, by the notoriety. The last thing that anybody in prison needs is a high profile. And they were, to a certain extent, author of their own misfortunes.
So I got a certain amount of writing ability, which I think my mother's passed down to me. She wasn't a writer herself. She's got great common sense in there, but I seem to get these inspirational flashes, and I think it's passed down from my mother. I can't see it being coming from anyone else.
Among his writings were certain revelations that were not popular with other members of the firm, who were still serving long prison sentences.
4 or 5 years later, he admits it. I done it for him. What good was that to me, or any of the other defendants, any of us? Nothing. Yeah, I was disillusioned with it. Big sick about it. There I am sitting in the nick for something that he couldn't admit before, and a couple of years later he comes out of it. Did we all go down for him to write a book?
Ronnie Kray wanted a traditional East End funeral, and his family made sure his wishes were respected down to the last detail. Among the masses of flowers was a tribute from Reggie, which read, "To the other half of me."
And then came the message from Reg. My brother Ron is now free and at peace. Ron had great humour, a vicious temper, was kind and generous. He did it all his way, but above all he was a man, and that's how I'll always remember my twin brother Ron. God bless Reg Kray.
Yeah, I used to get free warnings type thing. If I felt that he wasn't right in himself, I get a kind of instinct about it, and I knew he was always right. We had a form of communication. It's very difficult. I still got it, in fact. My back area feels very burning in a nice way. A nice warm glowing feeling. And I think that's Ron's presence. I've not had it since I was in Maidstone. I've been back the last few days.
Do you think you were dominated by Ronnie?
Well, I suppose there's a possibility. I allowed him to dominate me to a point. I think it's some silly thing I admit that just let there be peace. You see? Yeah.
I first met Reg, it was about 5 years ago, and it was through a mutual friend. Reg was making a documentary video about Ron's life, the death of Ron, the funeral, and he wanted someone who would do all the press releases, to help out with press releases. And a friend of mine was supposed to be doing it, couldn't do it, and asked me if I would do it. I don't doubt that there was a big space in in Reggie's life and a terrible emptiness. And I can't say I went in and filled that, because you can't replace someone else, you can't take the place of them, but you can just help to ease that pain and to give someone some love. And if they can give you some love back as well, then you have achieved something.
I think Rob's influence is very great on me, you know. She's got great influence on me, without being stern, without any influence coming across. It's there. You know, I would never be dominated by any woman or anyone else. But she's got great influence over me, and we get on well together.
He was different to how I expected, and he was a much warmer person, much livelier person, a much more interesting and intelligent person. And from that day we began a friendship, and that friendship grew into love and marriage. It was interesting. I don't think I ever perceived him as a psychopath, because I don't believe he ever filled the criteria for a psychopath. Obviously he had killed, but I think one of the interesting things about him, I felt, was his courage. And I know people will sit there and think, well, what's courageous about spending 32 years in prison? But it's the way that he spent that time and how he survived that time. And I think a lot of people in a similar situation would be very angry at other people, at the world. They would turn against them. They would turn in against themselves, become very self-destructive. And I'm not saying that Reg never felt any of those emotions. You know, he was a human being, of course he did. But he went through them and came out the other end, and found something good in the world for himself.
I just wish I'd have met Rob about 20 years earlier, eh? I don't think I'd have had any problems then, eh? I think everything would have worked out okay.
I think the telephone was what enabled our relationship to grow and to thrive. Reg rang me every morning as soon as he got up. He'd ring me last thing at night before he locked up, and he would ring me anything from 10 to 20 times in between, depending on how many phone calls he could get hold of. Reg proposed to me over the phone, I might add. And so I asked him if he was down on one knee, and he said he definitely was. We got married in the chapel at Maidstone Prison. They originally refused to let us have any photos taken of our wedding at all, and it took a lot of persuasion before they finally agreed. But only on the condition that a prison officer took the photographs and that they held on to the negatives afterwards. About a month after the wedding, they took us into a small room when I was on a visit. They had the photographs laid out on a table, 60, 70 photos, and they told us we could choose 10 of those pictures. It was 15 months before I finally got the set of 10 pictures. All these photographs are obviously Crown copyrighted. We weren't allowed to use them. The 10 I received I wasn't allowed to reproduce in any way. They belonged to the Crown.
That's why. They're Crown copyright, aren't they?
That's what we were told.
Yeah. Pretty we couldn't do anything with it, isn't it? Eh?
I don't think I'd have married Reg if I'd believed that he was never coming out of prison, because I think it would have been a meaningless gesture. And when I did marry him, it was firstly a commitment to him to say I love you, but secondly to say I believe in you, and I believe that one day you are coming out of prison. And yes, you hope that it will help, that he will be coming out to a stable home, a stable place to live, and all those factors will help in the parole board's decision.
Do you think the Home Office reacted against giving you parole because they thought maybe there had been other killings?
I'm sure this was part of their reasoning for not giving me parole. There's one feature of it anyway.
Were there any other killings?
One. Right.
There's rumours. I think Nipper Reid would be able to tell you the answer to that.
I would imagine that would be Teddy Smith. Teddy Smith was a homosexual friend of Ronnie's, and Smith suddenly disappeared.
He showed up in the Regency, drunk as a skunk, shouting about Mitchell. We got him in the car, taking him round to the twins' house, and he said, "Stop the car, I want to take a leak." So he goes behind the house or something, and that's it. Never see him again.
You know, he's a frequenter. He was there every day, and then suddenly he just went off. And we made all kinds of inquiries, and people said, "Well, don't know what happened to Smithy."
The vice the twins had, Reggie and all at times, was boys. That was their vice.
Of course, we knew Ronnie was, fancied boys. We knew that from the days of the early days when he told Charlie. He said, "We had a big quarrel on this, Charlie." He said, "You might as well know it." He said, "I'm bisexual." Well, Charlie was dumbstruck. He looked at him. He went, "What? I can't believe you, mate." He said, "Well, you like men as well as women?" He went, "Yes." He said, "If Mother can cope with it, she knows, so can you." And he walked away. And that was the statement when he first admitted openly, I'm bisexual and I'm proud of it, so I don't care who knows.
And Reggie was also bisexual. Being gay then wasn't like being gay now. It was sort of all have to be hid under the carpet type of thing.
We was at a party one night in East End, and I went looking for my mate Harry Abrams, and he was with this girl. Anyway, I went in the wrong room. I opened the wrong door, and there was Reggie giving the young boy one. And I thought, God, and he come out, got hold of me, Reggie outside. He said, "You're dead." He said, "Don't you breathe a fucking word of this." He said, "You're dead."
I think they being the macho image they had, they would like, to me, they wouldn't show that side of their nature or their character. They didn't want me to see that. And I never suspected Reggie. I thought Reggie's always been a straight guy,
I never had a problem with it at all. I didn't say that it diminished his love for me in any way. That he could fall in love with a man, he could fall in love with a woman. And we had fallen in love. I was aware that he was bisexual, and I accepted it. I was also very aware that, having been in prison for, by then, 27, 28 years, that he had spent that time surrounded by men where the only possibility of any kind of relationship, emotional, sexual, whatever it might be, it was always going to be with another man.
I think he fought it in the beginning. I think it came out when he was in prison more than anything else. He certainly liked the company of women, and he was debonair, and I'm sure there's quite a few young ladies who've been to bed with Reggie, I can guarantee that.
We weren't able to consummate the marriage while he was in prison, obviously, but later we were.
You used to train a lot in the prison. Did you stop that regime as a result of feeling ill?
Yes, I stopped training hard. When I got to Wayland, I still used to go to the gym, but I lost the incentive I had. Not because I didn't want to do it, but because of the stomach problems. So I still trained over that period of 3 years, but it started to decrease then. I still think it's the best thing to do in prison. I can't keep talking about prison, can I?
Reg was ill for a number of years, probably starting at Maidstone, continuing at Wayland, getting progressively worse through his 3 years at Wayland until the final year, when he was in almost continual pain and discomfort.
Over that period of years, did you feel you had something seriously wrong with you?
I definitely did, and I told him this. I definitely did. I knew there was something seriously wrong. It couldn't be otherwise. I was going to the toilet so many times a day. It was physically impossible, almost. And when I told him this, it didn't have any bearing on it.
I says to him, "You don't look too clever." But I shouldn't have said that to him. I should have said, oh, you're looking all right. You know what I mean? But you don't think. You just say what's on your mind. And he didn't look clever at all. He looked very ill. And he was. He had cancer.
Do you feel that death is the only way they would release you? Do you feel they wanted to keep you in there forever?
I think the way I was released wasn't satisfactory to them, but it helped to resolve a very bad embarrassment on their part. So that's the best they got a good deal really. They got a good deal. They found a way out, but I still fell in front of them.
It was a huge event for him to get his freedom. He'd waited 32 years for that, and he was tremendously happy, he was tremendously elated. But at the same time, the downside for it was that it was almost like a confirmation of the fact that he was dying.
You don't see it at the time, because I had a wife and a young child, and I had a son born when I was on remand. I was never to see him until he was 16 years of age when I come out. I had a daughter who was nearly 6 and was 22, nearly 23 when I come out of the nick. The marriage was over. My father became an old man, never knowing really what had happened. You know, and the tragedy and heartache there left for all our families. What good came out? Where was the glamour and all that? There was nothing glamorous about it.
We'd lost everything really. We'd given everything up for them. Our future, our lives.
Our club got ruined after the trial. In a matter of about months, the police revoked the licence and put us out of business. It's like the association, the smear it rubbed off on us, you understand? 1970, that was it, it was all over.
It's really a Cockney tragedy. It's a very, very sad, god-awful story. The idea of it actually encouraging anyone, or anyone wanted to be like the Krays, is another part of the sadness, because it's something sad in our own society, which makes heroes of people like this.
What better message can you put out to the would-be gangsters of today, or the criminals coming up? These are the heroes you look up to the youth, and say, well, look what happened to them. The 3 of them have all died in prison.
I find it hard to believe they're all gone, sitting here today. But it seems to me that that's the way it had to be, one or the other. It was a warning that if you do this or you do that, this is what could happen to you. And I think that was the message left here over the years.
Prison life is a waste of time. I get letters from all over the country. These kids write to me, and I advise them. It's very difficult when kids got nothing to do and they've got no money and they've got all kinds of social problems out there, so it's easier to say than it is done. But speaking from my heart to them, I'd like to see them stay in prison. But whether they can do so, I don't know. Some will make it and some won't.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly, moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.